page and kind of see some of the work that you all have already done. And so this is great. I love it. And I saw that you had Justin Lewis on last year, and that's one of my frat brothers. And it was just his birthday the other day too. So small world. But so yeah, no, it's definitely an honor and a pleasure to talk to you all tonight. So it's a little bit about myself. So born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, grew up in Brooklyn Park. My family, I'm a first generation Cameroonian American. So both my parents are from Cameroon, West Africa. My dad came here in the 70s to go to school. Actually, first was in Stevens Point, Wisconsin for like a semester. And he came in January with no jacket and just had the fullest culture shock you could possibly think of, and had a friend that was at the University of Minnesota from Cameroon, and told him to transfer there, and he packed up his stuff and I don't know if he drove or how he got there, but he figured out a way to get to Minneapolis and never left. He's been here ever since 1973 or whatever, so it's been a long time. I think it's like coming up
Black Lives
on
Matter.
yeah, it's coming up on a very long time since he's been in Minnesota. So he's been here twice as long as he's been in Cameroon now. So yeah, it's crazy. And my mom came here in the 80s, and they, had me in the late 80s, and I have a younger brother who's a doctor. He's a pediatrician in Cincinnati, and my sister, she works for the state of Minnesota doing social work with youth in this Black youth program at the state of Minnesota that she just started back in January. So yeah, that's a little bit of my family. My mom's a dental hygienist, retired dental hygienist. She kind of just does it part time now, and my dad he's just doing consulting at his retired age. So as far as my family now that I'm kind of starting, as Alpha alluded to earlier, I live with my fiance Sierra, who is originally from born in Hawaii. Her parents are both in the Navy. That's where they met, and but she's from DC. And so we met in 2019, right before the pandemic, dated through the pandemic, and got engaged in 2021 and get married in August. So and we have a dog. Her name is Marley. She's a double doodle, so she is half golden doodle and half labradoodle. So it's a lot of doodles in there, and some labs and some retriever, and she has a black coat, but it's like turning gray, kind of silver now. So it's really weird, but she's great. She's about to be a year in March. And so, yeah, that's my family. And then as far as just my background, went to Chandler Park High School in Brooklyn Park, and we just bought our house in Brooklyn Park. So I'm like actually living where I grew up, which is really weird because I haven't been around in this area for 15 years. My parents moved to Apple Valley, which is, the cities, it's like way south of where I grew up, closer by the airport in Bloomington. And so I hadn't really been around Brooklyn Park, but it's changed a lot. Like the Target headquarters is here now, and like all these different things are going on, a lot of development, very, very diverse. It's diversified so much since I was in high school. So I felt like, hey, it's familiar, and it's like, a little bit easier a transition from my fiance coming from DC to Minnesota to live. So we built a townhome here, and that's where we're at now. And as far as like college, I went to the University of Minnesota, got my degree in strategic communications, so advertising and PR. And right after college, I was doing a fellowship with the Historical Society, and then I also got started working part time at Apple, and that's where I met Alpha. And at Apple, I was just doing sales, just trying to get some extra money, and then like we had our boss, our store leader, Hal Reynolds, who we're all still very close with. I actually just saw Hal at church on Sunday with his fiance Lauren, and we he just was really great at helping us get into positions just to kind of explore our careers. And I kind of got into the business side of Apple. So I was doing B2B sales for Apple for about 5 years, and then eventually ended up going into business consulting after I left Apple in 2017, and went and worked at a nonprofit called META, Metropolitan Economic Development Association. And at META, we work specifically with entrepreneurs of color to help them grow their businesses, find access to capital, provide technical assistance, which means like just general consulting, helping with business plans and like projections and all that stuff. A lot of that stuff I learned while doing my stuff at Apple, and just from like my other experiences. And also around that time, I also co-founded an organization called Gravity, which focused on working with people of color who wanted to break into tech startups. I had actually, it's so funny because all these things are happening at the same time. So if you remember Ian, Alpha, you remember Ian Spinelli from Apple?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so Ian was working at a startup when we were in Apple in 2013, and he invited me to help because I was killing it at sales. So they were going to San Francisco for a conference, for the game developers conference, and they needed some extra people. And I was like, I really wanted to work in a startup. That's really like eventually where I wanted to go. That's where I thought I wanted to go after I left Apple, because we worked with so many startups while we were there. And so went there and got my experience being in the startup world, and like it was a great experience. Like I was in Silicon Valley and with all these techies and everything like that, and it was just like blew my mind. And I was like, I want to help a business grow one day. So um, got that experience, and then like really quickly after we got back from that trip, the company actually folded. The board and the founders couldn't agree on how to launch the product, so the board pulled invested their money out, and the company folded, and then the product never got released. So it was just like the grand opening, grand closing reality of startup life. Was really interesting, and I was just helping them part time, but I was really considering leaving Apple to go work for this company. And so yeah, so like I actually just talked to one of the guys literally before I got on this call. He reached out to me earlier in the week just to check in, and his name is Eric, and he just reached out to me. So it's just crazy how that came full circle. But after the whole startup stuff and doing Gravity, which Gravity we focused on meeting up with founders of color, people who want to break into tech startups. So that's where I got that inspiration from, and then also working at Apple, being around a lot of startups as business customers at the with the business team. And so we did a summit on an annual basis with Gravity, or biannual, so every other year. We did one in 2017 and 2019. And we would host monthly events and like fireside chats with founders to talk about how to raise money and the challenges for being a founder of color and venture capital. And there's a huge disparity and gap when it comes to people of color getting invested money into. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But so that's the type of work I was doing after then the pandemic hit. And so that changed a lot about how we did our events. We kind of just pulled back. My half of my team, one of my team members for Gravity, she get her master's and she was working for Google, and she moved to Cali to go get her master's at USC. My co-founder Alex, he was working with his family business during COVID, and then I ended up going to the Center for Economic Inclusion after leaving Meta, which was my full-time job while I was doing Gravity, and going to be do racial equity consulting. So that's kind of like how I transitioned into racial equity consulting, and was leading a new. So that was kind of a startup in and of itself. It was a nonprofit that was only been around for about 4 years when I got there. And now they're doing some really good work. But my job. This is like literally when I left Meta was the day of the murder of George Floyd. I put my 2 weeks in that day, not knowing what was happening. And then when I went on Facebook after I sent that email, I hit send on that email, went on Facebook. I was tagged in the video. I didn't watch the video because at that point I was just exhausted from watching like black men get killed on social media after seeing the Philando video actually live when it was when his girlfriend was on Facebook Live. I saw the actual live thing, not knowing what I was watching. So I was a little triggered and I just kind of left it alone. And then I kept getting calls and text messages and like I lived in Uptown during that time, so it wasn't very far from South Minneapolis where it happened. And I had a lot of friends who were reacting to it and trying to figure out what was really going on, and I didn't even watch the video for like maybe 4 months. I just kind of like listened to what happened, and that was really tough of a transition from like not only from the line of work I was doing, but just mentally, it was really, really draining. Obviously, it was draining for everybody. We were dealing with COVID, and at that time, I'm in a long distance relationship with my girlfriend, and she was actually in Minnesota with me when that happened. So this is like thrusting into like, hey, you might consider moving to Minnesota, and then this happens, right? So it was very, very, it was a lot. So during that time, I'm transitioning jobs, going to CI, at the Center for Economic Inclusion as a equity consultant, my job was to work with corporations to help them figure out how to like integrate racial equity best practices throughout their organization. So I'm leading a team of consultants to like figure out, what's going on in the organization, where are some opportunities. We have what we call the 5 Ps, which is we looked at people, policies, procurement, philanthropy, and the products that they sold, and how are they integrating racial equity into all those areas. And we feel like if you were doing that, you could be successful. And we try to position racial equity as less than as a need to or a desire, but more so as even just a business. We put a business case for it, because when you think about the missed opportunity of like talent that people are not looking at because of implicit bias and things like that, or policies that exclude people, or you look at products that alienate people, right? We've seen a lot of that happening recently, and how companies have to like remove a product and then like make an apology, and that takes time, money, and it affects your brand and all of that stuff. So we were trying to appeal to that sense of it, because at the end of the day, when you're talking to these big companies, a lot of really what they care about is their money, right? And how do you try to make change? You got to look at the money at that from that standpoint. So that's kind of how we approached it. And we had our ups and downs and challenges, but ultimately the reason why I ended up leaving after 2 years was simply because being newly engaged and working in a startup environment, it was very stressful. And like I wanted to find something a little bit more stable for me personally, in a career that I felt like I could grow into a little bit more. So that's how I ended up in philanthropy now. Currently, my current job, I'm at the Minneapolis Foundation. And at the Minneapolis Foundation, I'm a philanthropic advisor. So I work with people who have what we call donor advised funds, which is essentially um, a charitable savings account per se, right? Where you will put money in to a fund, and then you will be able to take that money and then make donations to different charities, nonprofits, 501c3 certified organizations. And and then I'm also, just doing work on our DEI committee team and things like that. So that's what I'm doing professionally. I do a lot of other things outside of work still now too. I know I kind of jumped around a lot, and that's like a really weird, like unorthodox pathway to get into philanthropy, but that's how I landed here. And I feel like every job I've had, I've just taken the transferable skills I've developed through the experiences I've had into the next job. So like working at Apple, like gave me the customer service skills and just the people skills to like understand people and like understand patients, how to deal with people in really stressful situations. Because when somebody comes to you when they drop their phone in the ocean and they had it in rice, Alpha knows what I'm talking about. They had it in rice for like 2 days. You and they have everything on there. You would know how to like really really kind of like deliver news and like understand people and different tempers and things like that. And then you go into business and like and then all the business stuff I learned while working at Apple and working with those businesses transitioned to my job at Meta and what I was doing with Gravity. And then going into CEI, it's more so the my passion for social justice and racial equity, like really all the stuff like with the historical society experience I've had, transition into my CEI
Yeah.
experience, and now working at the Minneapolis Foundation. But go ahead, Alpha.
Yeah, I was actually going to talk. Yeah, there's. I mean, we've talked numerous times about customer and customer service. Working at Apple. That was something I was going to talk about because I know, um, when George Floyd happened,
Yeah,
something that's I don't if you don't want to talk about it, let me know. But like I remember, you were actually with Royce White when you
yeah,
guys were. So Sam was actually on the 35 or 55 bridge when a semi truck driver drove into a group of protesters that were crossing the highway. I don't know if you guys remember that or not.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Sam,
yeah. It was, yeah, I can talk about it. It was really surreal. I've been to a number of protests before. My fiance hadn't been to a protest in Minnesota. This was her first Minnesota protest. She'd done some stuff in college, but not any. I think she did some stuff for like Trayvon Martin when that happened.
okay,
But she hadn't been to one in Minnesota before, and So this is our first one, and we're on the bridge, and I'm on live trying to just kind of show everybody what's going on. And like literally my video catches it
Yeah,
happening.
I
And
was watching you live, and I'm just like,
yeah, it was
what?
insane. And then everybody started running, and then we got separated. It was a lot going on.
Yeah,
And and it was even worse because like again, understanding like we were so the protest was approved to happen on the bridge. Like they got clearance to do that. They had I don't know why or how that truck driver came through because there was no other cars coming through. Like we was literally out of nowhere that truck came through, and there was supposed to be police blocking because they had that we had like helicopters over and everything just watching to protect us. So we thought, and then like when everybody started running, it was really weird because then the police started being very hostile towards the people who were just experienced the situation. So when you think about like just the sheer like damage that can do to further the distrust between the people and the police department, it's like that was probably the worst thing that they could have done. Rather than
yeah,
trying to like help people be safe, they were like really aggressive. And it was like there was tear gas and all this stuff. I'm like, nobody, nobody like that was a random truck driver that came through, and
mm,
it was a very surreal situation.
got it, got it.
Um, so yeah, that was probably the most insane thing I've seen at a protest in my time, and I've
Yeah,
been to a number of them. I helped organize the Trayvon Martin protest when I was at the University of Minnesota. The I think we called it the 10,000 hoodies protest. That I think it was that May. So that was my senior year at the University of Minnesota, and so like that was and that one was great. Like we marched around the campus and we kind of gave our speeches at the Northrop out of like on the steps of Northrop in the mall area there and but yeah, this one was different.
mm. Big thing we went through as AIME United as a community here about 2 years ago. We had a really big conflict with what I want to call school board shenanigans. People just getting real loud
Mm.
at school boards. It left some scars on a lot of us. With working so many avenues that you've been through, what things have you done really to kind of not so much as overcome those conflicts, but being our goal is to be able to work with the people in our community, not dissent us more and more and more. So I guess I
Yeah,
kind of get like your feel, like what do you feel are the things that I guess you would hold on to work with people in your community who may or may not agree with you.
that's a really great question. I think um the most important thing is in situations like that, every I try to not only look at okay of my network who I know, like who's somebody that either can if it's not me, because you have to know yourself, right? Like I know that I know where like I stand on a lot of issues, right? And I know like there's certain situations I don't want to put myself in just because I don't want to take that stress home and I don't want to like continue to be you know, just having all of that pressure on me personally. So I know like my lane, like for example, I used to be in the organizing side of the protests, right? And I realized that that was taking a toll on my mental health. And so I had to take a step back and look at, okay, my area of being able to affect social justice is in economic development and philanthropy and all these other avenues that still will help us make progress in certain areas. And my friends that are still in the community organizing space, my role is if I can find and leverage resources to get them to make their experiences better, that's how I'm going to play my role to make sure that work is getting done. So you got to know yourself to like really understand like where do you feel your skills, your talent, your capacity is going to best be utilized. Because if you try to do everything, you're going to burn yourself out. You're not going to be useful to anybody, right? And so it's really just having that conversation with yourself and be like, where do I feel like I really fit in this whole entire puzzle? Because there's so many ways to make change, right? And so I look at like, if from a school board standpoint, who are the people you know that are like teachers in education who are not as on the furthest side away from you on the issues that you can talk to really say this is why this is important, and you build that coalition of people so that way once you have the numbers on your side, you're able to really start to make change and understand how the power dynamics work in those spaces, right? Like the reason why the school board is the way it is because the same people with the same views have been on it for the same for X amount of years. So if you guys can organize and say, okay, we want to get a slate of new people on the school board, so that way we can have the conversations that we're having. It's not just the parents or the community talking at the school board, but it's the school board talking within the school board to make change happen, right? Because if you have the change on the inside, it's easier to see that change happen. You're going to see it happen faster. So start to strategize that way. I don't know if you've already started doing that. If people from your group have already started looking at, okay, how can we get on the school board to really start to make change? But you got to have that. You got to have something. Whoever's doing that has to have a hell of a lot of patience and deal with a lot of nonsense. So just be prepared for that.
And that's why I call
But
it school board shenanigans. Like it's
yeah,
and we are definitely a farming community. Like to put it in scope of where this is, Sam. So like if you know where Forest Lake, Minnesota is,
Mhm.
if you went 10 miles straight into Wisconsin from Forest Lake, you would hit Amory. So that's kind of the area. So we're not, when I say like, I mean, sorry, I'm kind of sidestepping, but me and Sam are part of a text thread of a bunch of our friends from Apple, and they feel like, I moved to Mars. I'm literally an extra 20 minutes away from most of y'all. But anyways, we are a farming community, and that's something we deal with is that you all have to think the same. And I think that's what I love about our group of Aim United. We all don't think the same. We all have our own views and how we want to do things. But that's what I wrote down is what are we willing to deal with and what are we not willing to deal with. This is going to be something um, I want to make sure everybody in the group is heard. Like because I think that's the biggest thing too is that um, like you said is that person has to have a lot of patience. And then we need to procure. We need to essentially have relationships with people in our schools. So thank you for
yeah,
that.
yeah. And
Um,
I'll just add to that really quick, Alpha. Like I feel like with any like really small group that's growing its membership, it's like I always try to, and this is what we did with Gravity. Like we looked at our team and we said, okay, who's good at what? And then we said, okay, what can we take as a collective and what are the three things we want to focus on so that way we can build our identity as an organization. And then once we feel like we've mastered those three things, then we can start to do the other things that we're passionate about as we build our membership and our capacity. Because what happens is when you start to try to do everything and every bad thing that happens, it becomes super overwhelming. And you don't want to burn out the good people that you have in the group, right? So
yeah,
you want to say, okay, if especially if you're going to go like tackle the school board thing, it's like if education is what you guys want to focus on because you feel like that's a catalyst for a lot of things and change happening, then organize around that, have that be your focus, and then do like the low maintenance stuff. You can still continue to do that, but like the things that are heavy lifts, like try to prioritize what the heaviest lifts are, so that way you can give yourself some grace in the process of growing the organization. Because if you're strategic that way, you're going to be able to show people like we have a clear vision on how we want to attack issues. This year, our agenda is focused on trying to get our school board the way that we want it to be, and that may be an extended goal, right? But if you're adding people and building your coalition to address that particular thing because you feel like it's going to have ripple effects moving forward, like that could be really powerful moving for your entire community moving forward, right? It can help change the trajectory of a lot of your kids' experiences in schools and whatnot, and kind of get people hip on what's going on and moving forward as the community continues to grow and diversify. So like that's one way to look at it, right? Just wanted to throw that out there.
no, I appreciate it. um, Another question I thought of with how so one of our goals that we have is we want to make sure as much as we are helping our community, we're also giving back to our community. So we do a lot with in the past we've done a lot with food justice. A lot of people
Hmm.
don't know what that is. And then we also, one thing I really love that a lot of other members have done is we work with a essentially a care center for victims of domestic violence and women of domestic violence
Love it.
in Northwoods. They're really from learning from my members. That's really the only like helping center that's like in this part of Wisconsin. Not until you hit like, you know, Wisconsin's huge, so like hours away.
Yeah.
Um, we basically want to make sure we can help our community as much as we can. So how are you? I guess how are you able to take people of a certain, let's just say Brooklyn Park or, your area, and how are you
Hmm.
able to help those people in those communities through like your philanthropic, ways, and also your like nonprofit ways, because that's what we are. We're always
Yeah.
looking to get more, but it just seems that like you said, if we get one bad, if 10 people don't like us, then they got to go tell 100 people they don't like us. So
Yeah.
we just don't want to be in a situation where reputation comes before us actually helping people.
Yeah. No, that's another great question. I think in the organizations that I've been with in the past, trying to identify who we can partner with on things is really important, especially as a smaller organization. Like partnerships can be really huge. Just from like not only from like a people power standpoint, like just having more people helping on the ground and organizing and whatnot, but then also just like building the brand of your organization and just the awareness of your organization and people knowing like who you are, what you're about, all of that. Um, and so, those partnerships, those strategic partnerships are really, really helpful for that. So like if you are doing a food justice event, you could partner with a local restaurant and then like talk about it there, or like host things at a place that a lot of people go to so that way you can get exposure and like, start to get people informed about what you're doing and the topic you're talking about. So I think those are some opportunities there. And then the other thing I would say is when it comes to the philanthropic side, um, with anything that you're doing, if it's a nonprofit that if you registered it and everything, it's just like really having it's all about like messaging and effective campaigning because that's like my strategic communication side coming up. Like you want to get people to know about the cause you're talking about, and you want to be able to raise awareness of that. Working at the foundation, there's so many different ways to give and help that I've learned in like the last since I joined in July. It's insane. I usually because it's so different working at a foundation versus working at a nonprofit. A foundation is a nonprofit, but I was working at places where I'm asking for money. We're getting grants from the foundation versus like giving that money away and in that different seat. So it's so many different ways. Looking at um when you're talking about one of the things that we have that we do at the Minneapolis Foundation is we have these things called giving circles, where it's like, you take a group of people who have a cause they're passionate about, and everybody says, okay, we want to build a fund over time to be give to this cause. So like it's kind of like you give your offerings at church. You kind of do it that way in the giving circle. So like on a reoccurring basis, you may give like, okay, I'm gonna give $100 or $50 here, and we're gonna build the pot. And then this money or this money that we raise is gonna go to a specific cause, right? And you're really intentional about how you do it. And we have a couple programs that have that model, giving circle model. Our fourth generation program, and then some of the other Friends of the Black Arts is another one that my one of my good friends Ernest runs.
Ernest Comer?
Yep, yeah,
Oh,
it's my
okay.
brother. Yeah, so he runs that, and yeah, so like that's focused on like trying to get more youth and black youth into the arts and music and culture aspect. So yeah, those are just some ways. Like I think giving circles are really effective ways of just like pooling money together. It's kind of like, I mean, essentially, like you think about like crowdfunding, GoFundMe's, those are kind of all giving circles in and of themselves. They're all they are platforms to like
To
put the
do it.
money
Yeah.
together. But when you talk about the power of finding a cause that you can rally behind and then getting people to like invest in that cause. And then you can say, okay, now we have the resource, which is the money to help make the impact that is necessary, right? So that's just another thing that I, seen us leverage at the foundation and what I've done in some of the other organizations I've been a part of.
Okay. Let me close that
I think
out.
Chelsea, you got a question? I saw you went off mute.
Oh yeah, I know. Like maybe you had originally planned to stay till 6:30, and so I don't want to hold you any
Yeah.
longer.
Oh no, no, I'm fine. I thought it was an hour, so we can go. We can go on.
Well,
Thank
okay then.
you.
Do you have any questions, Chelsea?
I was thinking about you were saying that when you were working as like a racial equity advisor, the work wasn't maybe like you transferred to full philanthropy because it was maybe more stable. And so I
Hmm.
that's the nature of these racial equity positions is that they are just temporary. Um, or like do you feel that there should be long-standing positions that they should be permanent within a company and that they're not?
I love that question. So yes.
Before you
So
start, I'm mute myself right now.
okay. So let's unpack that a little bit because I love that question. I'm happy you followed up with me on that. So there's two folds on that question and the answer I'm going to give. The first thing was the organization I went to was the Center for Economic Inclusion. You can look it up. They do a lot of really great work. It was a nonprofit startup. So my wanting to leave was more so on the startup side of things, but also because it, for me personally, going into racial equity consulting during that time of George Floyd and the pandemic, and like just how everything was virtually was very, very challenging, just emotionally for me. And so that's what made me want to personally transition into a different sector, right? And during the time at the center, I was working with a lot of foundations, and I was learning more about philanthropy and learning more about how impactful it could be. And I felt like, for me, I saw I like learning about all the things that we talked about at the center with all the gaps and disparities that Minnesota has between the white community and the black community. I felt like philanthropy was a great opportunity to like help close some of those gaps. So that's one of the transitions I went. One of the reasons I transitioned into that space. But the other side of your question, as far as those jobs leaving corporations, is very real because one of the things that we saw is as we were getting asked by organizations, we're reaching out to the center for consulting opportunities and whatnot. We're noticing that um, not only are the racial equity positions, the DI positions at corporations, not necessarily set up to really be as effective as you would think should be. They oftentimes, if you're in that position, you don't have ultimate decision making ability. You're underneath somebody that does. So you're still having to fight upwards to get change to happen. But the companies will put those positions there to say they did it, but they don't have any plans on actually changing. And so we realized that was a big barrier. And so we would just call people out on that, to be honest with you. We say, hey, if you really want to have change, you need to have somebody on the C level, the C-suite level that has this role that doesn't report to anybody else, but sets the agenda for your entire organization. So that way you're able to really effectively make change. Otherwise, it's never going to happen. And so that that obviously can become frustrating for anybody trying to work on the other side to really make change because you're just going to run into these roadblocks and you have things in organizations like gatekeepers who are just trying to keep things the way they are, who don't believe there's a problem, all those different things. So yes, that definitely is an issue that we ran into a lot when I was in that role. But as far as why I left that, it was mainly because of just it was more personal. It was just more like I felt like I got the really good experience. I did really good work in that space. And I have the skill set now to take the lens that I have, the racial equity lens that I developed in that role into a new sector that needs it as well, right? And but it's not as heavy on me every day, if I should say that.
Yeah, that's really valuable. And it seems like, that ties into what you were saying about like find out what your lane is.
Yeah.
So, which kind of leads into my second question, which is like, feel like my lane is education because that's where I work and I care about the school board and I'm showing up and looking at the elections and that kind of stuff. But another thing I really care about is our local police department,
Hmm.
because we're a small town that's very white, and I'm sure there's a lot of implicit bias on the force. And so one of the things that I really hope we can do is just like build um I don't even know if I know how to phrase it yet, but I just want to like get in communication with our police department and ensure that they're operating holistically and ethically. And so I don't know if you have any advice to offer on this, but like um do you know if police departments ever have racial equity consultants? Can
Mm.
you recommend any consultants that we could bring so that we have kind of like, an educated way to go about it instead of just like maybe putting my foot in my mouth in front of our whole community?
Yeah, no, I know, I appreciate the question. I think it's definitely you're on the right track as far as how to try to kind of, for lack of better words, extend that olive branch and try to like really make some like tactical, sensible like change within that relationship between the community and the police department. Um, I do have a couple of friends that have done work with police departments. Um, One person that would be a really great person for you guys to just learn from or even just look up. His name is Eliza Derrick. He's a good friend of mine. He actually was formerly incarcerated. He got arrested as a juvenile, was in prison for like 14 years or something like that, and recently got out. And he was able to get himself out of jail because he got went to school while he was in prison, got his bachelor's degree, was working on his master's in law, and got out. And I was in a leadership cohort with him like the first year he got out of prison, and he has been he's run campaigns for mayoral campaigns for people. He's now the executive director of the Minnesota Freedom Fund. He has his own consulting business where he goes to organizations and does DEI and racial equity consulting. He's doing a lot, and he's just an amazing person. But he'd be a really good person because I know he's done some experience with police departments in the past. And But yeah, he'd be a really good person. His name is Eliza Darris, and if you look at Minnesota Freedom Fund, you'll see him there as the executive director. Um, and yeah, and then I'm trying to think of. There's a couple of other people that may. Another person to look up is Leslie Redmond. She was the president of the NAACP here in the Twin Cities for a while, especially during COVID. During George Floyd, she was the president, and she is amazing. She has an organization called Don't Complain Activate, where they do a lot of organizing and training and historical wealth transfer. She's really big on learning from our elders and like the people in the civil rights movement who have done that work in the past and what are the things they went through, because a lot of what's going on, we're just repeating the same stuff over and over again. So she kind of approaches it differently. So these are people that I would look up. Definitely could maybe even invite them to speak at some point, but they are, if you just look up the work that they've done, you'll learn a lot about how to approach it. And then like another really great person that I actually interviewed yesterday for my job was Dr. Yahuwah Williams from the University of St. Thomas. He's actually doing work and research on the Minneapolis Police Department through the University of St. Thomas Racial Justice Initiative. If you look him up, it's Lyo and then Huru Williams at University of St. Thomas. He's great. He's really super down to earth guy. But just look up the work he's doing with policing. And he's written a couple books. There's a book called Afterlife talking about after COVID and George Floyd and policing and everything that he just wrote. He has another book coming out here shortly. But he's another really great person to look up and just kind of read. he has interviews on critical race theory. He has critical interviews on policing and all of that stuff that you can just learn from. He's an historian. He's a professor at St. Thomas as well too. So those are just three names that I can think of off the top of my head that I think will really help you out as far as how you're trying to figure out where to go and what to do. But and then I would just look at. I'm trying to think of like actual consultants that could come on the ground and do that work. I have to ask some friends in Wisconsin if they know any people there that could do that. But since you guys are close to the cities, I'm sure like somebody from the cities could also do it as well too. Um, do you guys have a local NAACP in your area?
Sorry, I don't know the answer.
That's okay.
No.
So if there is the closest one to you guys might be St. Paul,
It's
double
probably gonna be St. Paul.
NAACP.
We did
Um,
have oh, I don't know, my brain doesn't work anymore. It was either a year
Angela,
and
yeah,
yeah, we had
yeah.
Angela come speak to us when she was in the NAACP.
So I know the NAACP does a lot of work with police departments as well too. So that's another avenue also that you could reach out to. Um,
Yeah, basically what we're trying to, and I appreciate Chelsea asking that question, is because in April what we want to do is, we actually had a little bit of a transition in our police department where the police chief, who was who was chief for decades, he retired, and now there's a new chief, and we just had the simple question like, has anyone actually met him? And we don't know him, and so like we said, just not so much. I mean, yes, it is an olive branch, but really, just to build rapport with our local policing is our biggest goal.
yeah,
I
I think,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead. I'm
I was
sorry to
gonna
cut you
say
off.
I shared. I think that's a big thing for me too. Sharing, growing up in growing up in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Um, you can ask how many black kids have raise your hand if you ever been stopped by the police for no reason. Everyone raises their hand. It's like, oh, I look like somebody. I'm like, really? I look like someone. Anyways, but yeah, regardless of attributes like height, sound, beard or no beard, like, no, you're black. Get on the wall. Like
Yeah,
that's what I'm used to. So just to
I mean,
kind
I
of,
experienced that as a student at the University of Minnesota,
yep.
like where I pay tuition, I still paying tuition. So,
I was
so
15.
I
Yeah, I was
mean,
15 at Richfield. So just the big thing for us is just to know more about our police. Not so much just to have information, but then just to know like we're people too. My kids are
yeah.
nuts. Yeah, they're running around. But that's it. That's it. Ain't trying to do
I,
nothing nefarious.
I think in a small town like that that's the best way to go.
Yeah.
There's not there's not enough for you guys not to know each other, right? When you look at it that way, so it's like if you are if, as an organization and as a group, like if you want to just say, hey, we want to just like build that relationship with, because it's not a necessarily we're against anybody. It's more so we want to make sure everybody is supporting and caring and loving of each other, right? And there's no incidences that happen in our community, and we are a community that will come together if something does happen and versus fight each other. And so just taking that, because they're not necessarily going to take that step. They probably aren't thinking on that level, but if you guys do that, it could really set a good precedent moving forward. So I would just, my first advice is just to reach out and see what that experience is like, and just find a local or restaurant just to have some. They like donuts, I heard, so maybe some coffee and donuts. You could do that.
Wisconsin, same as Wisconsin. Cheese curds.
Cheese
Cheese
curds. That was
curds.
the next thing I was gonna say. That was the next thing I was gonna say. Cheese curds and beer. So you can go to like a distillery or someplace, right? Or you can go and get some donuts from Dunkin'. If you guys have a Dunkin' out there, we just started getting Dunkins in Minnesota. I don't know if you guys have Dunkins yet.
Oh,
So
they've had it. They've had it for a while. There's one in
okay.
Menominee. I was geeked. I'm like, what? I got one. I only got a couple questions left. Anybody else got questions or? All right. So this is gonna be actually an Apple question because you know what this is.
Okay.
My question to you was, with working through so many different channels, and all that, how has your moral compass changed for the better? You know what that is.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good question. So are you talking about as far as like my Apple experience, like working
Well,
there?
I mean, that for me and you, that both changed. But just like you, when we were working there, our moral compass was all about empathy, right? Like, okay, we
Yeah.
get it. But now, we're out of the fruit stand. So like, how has your moral compass changed from like, you don't have to be empathetic anymore. You have to be, you have to be directional. You have to be all these things. So I'm just,
Yeah,
how's all the work you've done changed your moral compass, to make you better? Is essentially that's how.
so that's a really interesting question. I appreciate you asking because I think about that all the time, and it's so funny because I've been in so many really crazy situations at different jobs that I've been in since I've been at Apple, and people literally say to me, "I don't know how you handled that situation," and I say back to them because I worked at Apple. Like, not gonna lie to you, there was so many like those Saturdays in the Apple store and how busy and crazy it was, and having to focus on somebody with all this noise going on and give them the best experience possible. It prepares you to deal with a lot of stuff, and so it's so weird. Like you wouldn't think it, but I a lot of the situations, if it was like a client being like when I was at Meta and a client was in crisis, like a lot of times, honestly, I told people I was a business consultant at Meta. I was really a firefighter because I put out a lot of fires. People will come to us when they have they don't have money to pay the rent at their place where their business is. They have to fire an employee. They need a loan. All these different things are going on. They took a predatory loan from a loan shark because they needed the money, like all these different things going on. And one of the reasons why Meta exists, so you guys have context. So Meta is what we call a CDFI. And again, if I'm using a lot of acronyms, so Meta stands for Metropolitan Economic Development Association. A CDFI is a community development financial institution. So the reason why CDFIs were created was because throughout history, banks were giving money to black people or any people of color, right? Due to being seen as high risk, due to lack of wealth or generational wealth as leverage for a loan, right? So and what's the fastest way to build wealth? Owning a home. Were black people getting loans for homes? No, they weren't. They were a lot of times because of redlining, they were getting put into the most least desirable places in every major city or put in projects or things like that. And there were renters and they were renting from white people who were building their wealth and being able to leverage that to grow their wealth for their family. So when you look at black entrepreneurs historically, they weren't able to go to a bank and get a loan or leverage their wealth as collateral on a loan because they didn't have any. So CDFIs are created to help mitigate some of those barriers and challenges to help provide a pathway for entrepreneurs of color to get access to capital. And so but because of that, the lack of wealth from a generational standpoint, financial literacy was also a challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs that we worked with, not knowing like the different things you needed in order to manage like your money the best way possible. So a lot of times, like as a business owner, I was putting out these fires trying to figure out how to handle these really complex situations. And then even when I was at CEI dealing with, going into a session with a discovery meeting with a business that we were trying to get to be a client and dealing with stuff at work in a very high paced, fast paced, high stressful situation. My coworkers look at me like, "How do you deal with that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I dealt with some stuff at that." So it's really kind of helped like with my patience and my empathy hasn't really changed too much. I think a lot of the jobs that I've done have all been about helping people, right? If you talk about being a business consultant, if you talk about doing what I did at CEI, if you talk about working in philanthropy, it's all about helping people. And everything that I do is with a customer service mindset. And that was drilled into me for the 5 years that I worked at Apple. So I think that all really helped. Um, and so yeah, I think that's kind of like the moral compass is intact, Alpha, so you don't have to worry.
So my last question is a super serious question. Um, Best breakfast setup. Go.
That's breakfast setup in bed. What are you talking about?
Ah,
No, I love going out to brunch with my fiance at different spots, especially if we're traveling. I think the best experience I have at breakfast is actually when I'm like traveling and I'm going to a brand new restaurant that I've never tried before. I have my go-tos that I like. We have this place called Fat Natch, which is like 5 minutes from our house. Love Fat Natch. It's amazing. I just get the same omelet every time. It's my thing. It's my comfort breakfast. We just had it this weekend. But when we first dated, before the pandemic, we went to New Orleans. It was our first vacation together, and we ate a lot, and it was amazing. And we went to this place in the French Square. I can't remember what it's called, but we had this like funnel cake waffle thing and just this like Creole omelet that they had. It was so good. And then we got some beignets from Cafe Du Monde, and like I had black on and I got powder all over myself. It was a whole thing. So it was a really cool experience. But like I just love traveling and going and eating breakfast at different spots. I do love breakfast food. I think it's up there. It's up there. I like dinner, but breakfast is good. Even though recently I'm not really eating breakfast as much. I like eating breakfast for lunch, and I like to having a shake for breakfast. That's kind of like my thing. And then I'll have dinner and I'll have really good dinner. So that's kind of like how I do it. So I'm like shake, brunch, and then dinner type of person. That's really
Got
where
it,
I'm
got it,
yeah.
got it.
Sorry for the long answer, but
No, no, no. You're fine, you're fine. For me, man, that's all I got, man. I like I said, I truly appreciate you taking time to talk to us. Man, Sam's getting married. What? I'm getting old.
No,
But
I appreciate the invite. It was really a pleasure talking to you all, learning about the work that you're doing in your community and the change you're trying to make. And like I said, just keep pushing. And I know it gets tough sometimes, especially dealing with crazy people. But um, somebody's got to do the work, And so we all kind of do our work in our own different ways. Um, you know, don't don't let, like I said earlier, like just continue to focus on and listen to yourself and like where you're at and where your capacity is, because how you show up makes a big difference when you're going to help somebody else out, and take that time to like get yourself right so that way you can give them the best experience possible and make that impact even more special. But like take care of yourself at the same time. Self-care is the best way to make change, because you have a bunch of people that are broken trying to help other people, it ain't gonna really fix anything. So just think about that.
yeah. Anybody else?
Just a big thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
No
Got a lot.
worries.
Appreciate it.
All right, man.
No
Well,
worries. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
yeah, man. All right, I'm gonna let you kick off. Go get back to your fiance and your fabulous dinner.
I
Uh,
appreciate it.
all right, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, bro. Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
bye. Yeah. Thanks, guys.